Hello, the top business stories now live from Sky News Centre. Could a shift to zonal pricing be the solution to high energy costs? We'll get opposing views from two of Britain's biggest energy firms. After a spate of ultra-rich departures, the Chancellor considers reversing a decision to charge inheritance tax on the global assets of non-DOMs. Plus, Donald Trump declares the US-UK trade agreement done with a deal for British cars and planes, but nothing yet for steel. Hello, good afternoon. You're watching Business Live with me, Jane Secker. Now, the head of Octopus Energy has said that other energy companies oppose zonal pricing because they financially benefit from the current system. Meanwhile, the chief executive of another of Britain's leading energy firms, SSE, has previously said that introducing a zonal pricing model for energy in the UK would create a postcode lottery. Earlier, I spoke to Greg Jackson, the chief executive of Octopus, Britain's biggest energy supplier. I began by asking him for his response to critics.
First of all, we've got a postcode lottery today. Ironically, people in Merseyside, Scotland and the north of England pay more for their electricity than people in London. Zonal pricing kind of helps rebalance that. And more importantly, it would reduce the total electricity bill in the UK by about 4 billion a year, potentially rising to 7 billion a year. And it does that because in today's electricity market, essentially every half hour, the people that operate the energy market get every electricity generator to submit their bid, how much they're going to charge for electricity. And whatever is the most expensive unit that goes on the grid, everybody gets paid across the whole country. That's what all the generators get paid. All that goes on our bills. And then to make it worse, some of the generators will be in locations where, the grid congestion, so electricity can't get to consumers. And then they get paid compensation off our bills. And then we pay another generator to fill the gap, often owned by the same people. Now, to give you an idea about how expensive this is, last week, just on 2 days alone, our nation paid £46 million just in 2 days. So far this year, it's 550 million we've wasted doing this. That's why we've got the most expensive bills in Europe, in the OECD.
So it's a lot of money, and you say it would reduce prices overall, reduce the overall energy bill, but you're not denying that it could mean that while some people might have smaller bills, others, possibly in the southeast, could have higher bills. You're not denying that, are you?
I think in the southeast, if you just did this kind of raw, then bills would go up by a few pounds a year, whereas they go down elsewhere by many tens of pounds. But to be honest, the savings are so big that what we suggested is you can smear the benefits and everybody's going to be better off.
But your rivals, say that you're deceiving people, that you're not making it clear that actually for some people the bills are going to go up. This row is getting pretty nasty, isn't it?
Yeah, as I say, look, the bills could go down for everyone, and that's what we advocate. But look, and the Energy Secretary said if he does this, no one's bills are going to go up. They're just going to go down. And the reason you're seeing that kind of behaviour from the rivals is they are benefiting from the current system. That's generating incredible profitability. Look, today...
But hang on, you're going to be benefiting as well, aren't you? I mean, you're not trying to tell me that Octopus is going to be worse off as a result of this. You'll be able to offer different tariffs, you'll be able to offer customers different things. Presumably, it is also good news for the energy companies like yourselves.
Well, first of all, I absolutely don't like having to send emails to 7.5 million customers, putting bills up all the time. UK customers are paying too much for electricity, and this will help bring it down. And yes, I want to put my name at the bottom of bills that are going down, not up. But also, the government's policies, things like electrification of heat and transport, are held back by high electricity prices. Now, we've invested a lot to drive electrification, but until we bring electricity prices down, that investment's not as effective. So look, consumers will benefit. A very small number of companies that today get paid tens of millions, sometimes in a single day, to turn off wind farms and generate gas elsewhere, don't like it because they prefer, the profitability of their existing business. But I'll tell you what, even those companies, some of them have told their own shareholders and investors they'll be okay if this is introduced. They're telling the government one thing, the media one thing, and their own shareholders another.
The other concern that they have is about dividing the country up into zones could deter investment into renewables. I mean, it is possible, isn't it? We saw a letter, 55 investors expressed their concerns to the government in a letter back in February. Any uncertainty in the market, changing the system, could potentially put investors off. And you need those investors if the government's going to meet its zero energy net renewable targets.
I mean, first of all, there are thousands of investors that didn't sign that letter. And in fact, thousands of small and medium businesses did sign a letter saying they want this to cut bills. Because the reality is British businesses, hundreds of thousands of British businesses, are struggling because of high electricity bills. They're cutting employment, they're not investing, and they can't compete against companies from other countries who pay less for energy. The people who build some of the infrastructure, of course they prefer the current market. But Amazon, Argos didn't get to lobby against Amazon. They just had to learn to compete in a different world. And we need the energy industry to be more grown up so that people pay less, not more.
We've only got 30 seconds left, but I can't really speak to you without asking you about the current situation in the Middle East and the impact that it's having on energy prices. We've seen oil prices obviously going up. They're going up from quite a low base compared to how they have been. But do you think this is going to affect possibly the energy price cap in the autumn? We know it's going to come down in July, but what happens now affects possibly what Ofgem's going to decide in the autumn.
Well, first of all, obviously, on a humanitarian level, we absolutely want to see peace in the Middle East. When it comes to energy, the big picture is, once again, it shows our dependence on fossil fuels and the importance of moving to renewables. And with market reform, that will bring prices down and it will give us independence from these kind of forces. In terms of energy bills for the future, it's far too far away for us to know. The good news is the UK has bought most of its energy in advance, and so we are cushioned against these short-term impacts.
Greg Jackson, Chief Executive of Octopus, good to talk to you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Let's now get the view from Alistair Phillips-Davies, who's the Chief Executive of SSE, another energy company. He joins me now. Well, Alistair, I'm sure you heard that. As he said, you just need to learn to compete in a different world, don't you?
Well, look, if we step back from this whole debate, I think we've got to accept that we've got a huge opportunity in this country to build a better energy system going forward. We agree completely with government that the Clean Power Plan 2030 is the right way to go. It's going to take away our dependence from fossil fuels and things of that nature. We need investment in order to do that. I think a lot of what's been talked about, it'll take a long time to put in place some of these reforms that have been talked about well into the 2030s. We've already agreed across the big network providers with government and with the regulator that will build new networks that will take much of those costs away. I think the important thing for us is that we all agree we want secure, affordable energy, and the current government's plans will deliver that.
Octopus say, though, that you're telling shareholders one thing and the government another.
Well, sorry. You can see whatever we say publicly wherever you like, and we're absolutely not telling the shareholders one thing and government another. We're very clear that we want to see investment. That's exactly what the government has set out. We've agreed billions of pounds worth of investment in networks. We've got a bigger network investment programme than we've ever seen as a company before in this country. It'll be over £20 billion over the next 6 to 7 years. And we've got a large number of projects that we want to build out. At the moment, we're currently building the world's largest offshore wind farm. That's enough power for 6 million homes, and it's at a fraction of the price that's currently been seen in the wholesale market. And that's because the wholesale markets are driven by fossil fuels to some extent. We've got the opportunity to build homegrown sources of energy. A lot of that energy is in the north of the country. A lot of that energy is offshore, and we need to make sure that we build the networks in order to connect it up. As I say, secure, affordable energy is what we're about, and we're absolutely standing ready to build that in line with government policy. And it's distractions like zonal which affect that. If you've got 50 plus companies that are developing these things that don't want to see that, if you've got 4 of the major trade unions in the UK that don't want to see that. If you've got large energy users, trade bodies also writing against that, then I think you've got a very, very small number of people who are arguing for this. It's just a distraction. We should remove it now, and we should get on with building the system that people want.
You say it's a small distraction here in the UK, but Canada, Italy, Denmark and Australia are all going in that direction, aren't they? Isn't this the future? And isn't the current system we have whereby we're balancing the power market, which means that wind farms are often being paid to produce less energy, is totally bonkers?
We already have locational signals in this country, so we already have some of those things. I think you'll find that there's very little evidence that introducing those particular markets has delivered anything in any of those countries, and we've looked at that, and we've had all the detailed discussions about that. We also should remember that people are saying that this will take until 2032. Well, by 2032, we'll have built much of the networks that are required to get the energy from these places down into the homes and businesses that actually need it. We just need to stay true to the course. What we need to do is back what we're already doing. Don't put in wholesale changes. There'll be plenty of changes in the market to make sure it operates effectively, but we can do that without having to tear it all up and wait 5+ years in order to put in a new market and create huge uncertainty, which will mean that the UK falls behind and we don't get the investments in the system that we need, and we don't create the manufacturing jobs like the cable factory that we've recently bought to the north of Scotland with Sumitomo.
OK. Alistair Phillips-Davis, the Chief Executive of SSE. Good to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Still to come on Business Live, Donald Trump says the UK-US trade agreement is done, but is it a good deal for Britain?
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Donald Trump has described the trade deal between the UK and the United States as done after he met Keir Starmer at the G7 summit. UK aerospace goods will now be allowed into the US tax-free, and the tax on car imports will drop to 10%, although the 25% tax on steel will remain for now. Joining me now is Harry Broadman, a former US Assistant Trade Representative and Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisers. Harry, good to see you today. So is this a good deal for the UK?
No, listen, any deal that we can do together, the US and the UK, is a good deal. I think it goes somewhat, along with what the UK has wanted. And I'm delighted that Mr. Trump has finally signed a trade agreement now that he's back in office. Of course, as any seasoned trade negotiator will tell you, signing the deal is one thing. Implementing it and enforcing it and making sure that both sides, abide by the rules, that's a whole other matter.
How good is it for the US? I mean, Trump clearly thinks it is, or he wouldn't have signed it.
No, absolutely. No, listen, absolutely. I think we need imports in order to stimulate competition in our own economy, and obviously, having a trade relationship that's robust with the UK is very important for the US, both in terms of our growth, employment creation, and as I say, improving our competitive edge in other markets. So. Listen, it's great, but this is just the beginning, hopefully, of other deals that he signs.
We're looking at all these images of the G7, and how important are they as a matter of shaping policy of these summits? Are they just, a chance for people just to have a bit of a chat, a bit of a gab fest, or is real business conducted there on the sidelines?
Having attended and staffing some of these, the real business is done on the sidelines. What the public will see is, apart from this particular deal with the US and the UK, collectively is what is in the communique that is signed by the leadership at the close of these summits. And people will parse all of the words that are in that communique because all of the 7 countries who have signed onto it now are obligated to follow what's in the agreement. Now, these don't have the force of law, but it is a question of whether there's goodwill around the table after signing it that it actually will be enforced and the 7 economies can move ahead. It's really important that these 7 countries agree on this because, the way that we're going to compete against China and other trade adversaries in the world is to do it through collective action, not through bilateral agreements. And if the G7 can't agree on a trade agreement that's robust to counter China and other competitors, we're in deep trouble, I think.
Well, that's part of the issue, isn't it? Of course, China, Russia and the like, not part of the G7. And if you're looking at global trade, the fact that they are excluded, that's an issue, isn't it, here?
No, absolutely. I write a monthly Forbes column, and I wrote one, I think, on the heels of not the last G7 summit, but the prior one, that the G8 actually should include China. From an economics perspective, Russia is not important economically, it's important from a foreign policy perspective. But having China at the table really is important because China gets the respect that it wants, but more importantly, it opens up a dialogue, among, the 7 largest industrial economies in China that otherwise has not been taking place the way that we have been dealing with China. All of the G7 economies have been doing it one-off bilaterally. And collective action is what is going to help move the needle. But more importantly, I think from the Chinese perspective, it gives them the respect that they want. And I think anyone knows that when you're part of a club, in quotes, you have some buy-in to make whatever it is that you've agreed a success. the G8 used to include Russia, right? That was for different reasons, not for economic reasons. I think, as I say, I proposed having a G8 that includes China from an economics perspective. I think that would be a really important step forward.
Harry Broughton, really good to talk to you today. Thanks a lot for joining us on Sky Business.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The Chancellor is reportedly considering reversing a decision to charge UK inheritance tax on the global assets of non-DOMs, following a spate of departures of ultra-rich individuals. The Treasury is said to be exploring tweaking the tax to avoid taking into consideration worldwide assets at 40%. Let's bring in Chris Giles, the Financial Times economics commentator and editor of the Monetary Policy Radar, who's been talking to the Chancellor. Chris, good to talk to you today. So the Chancellor is apparently considering making these changes to the new non-DOM tax, specifically on inheritance tax. This sounds a little bit like another government U-turn.
It does, doesn't it? And I think it is quite likely to be another government U-turn, because the government itself is not in any way trying to steer people away from the reports in the Financial Times this morning and in other news organisations. They're not denying this. They say that they are looking at the subject, and they say that if they can make tweaks that improve the outlook for everybody, then that's something they will do. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor herself, didn't confirm or deny this on stage earlier today, but she was certainly not trying to steer people away from the idea. And I think it comes because, in the end, even though the politics of this might be difficult, if you're not going to raise any money anyway through charging inheritance tax on the global assets of the absolutely mega rich because they won't locate themselves in the UK, then there's no point in having that tax. And so you might as well try and find a tweak. I'm sure the government is not going to throw out the whole of its abolition of the non-DOM regime, but it will, if it can, tinker around the edges so that it doesn't really lose very much revenue, but doesn't also lose people. And it's no good for the government having all these stories of an exodus of rich and wealthy people leaving the UK.
I mean, the government is obviously keen to show voters that they are not favouring the richest in society but the poorest. But how much do the richest contribute in terms of tax receipts for the government?
Well, in terms of income tax, let's take an example. They contribute a vast proportion of the income tax revenue. So the top 1% of people with earnings will contribute over 20% of income tax revenue. So one of the things that's quite strange about the UK and unusual globally about the UK tax system is just how much money it does already take from the rich. Now, so the politics of this is really quite hard. When you've been talking, you spent nearly a year talking about taking winter fuel payments off pensioners, and you've been resisting ending the 2-child limit on benefits. And then if you're seen to be giving money away to the super rich, then that is a difficult political question. But if you're not going to get money from them anyway because they're leaving the country, so actually you'll raise nothing. And in fact, you might lose money because they might then stop paying the tax they do pay. Then I think the economic calculations are in some ways more important than the political ones, which will go away quite quickly, because there is something quite odd about seeking to charge inheritance tax on the global assets of people who haven't been born here and have been living here for maybe not a very long time.
Chris Giles from the Financial Times. Good to talk to you. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from Business Live this afternoon. It will be back tomorrow morning at 11:30. Coming up here next, though, it's the News Hour with Mark Austin with all of the day's breaking news. Stay with us.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast. It's starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.